Здравствуйте. Доброе утро. Добрый день. Меня зовут Вера Алексеевна Полякова-Норвуд. Добро пожаловать на урок русского языка. На уроке мы говорим по-русски. So let's get started right away. And today we shall begin our conversation with the basic things that you ought to be able to express about yourselves in Russian. Your name, where you live, and where you study. See if you can answer these questions on the spot. Как вас зовут? Хорошо. Did you start with меня зовут? Yes, that's the right way to handle this question. How about где вы учитесь? You should begin with я учусь в школе, and then you add the name of your school. And let's try one more question. Что вы изучаете? Я изучаю, and you give me the names of all the subjects that you study. So these are the three questions that we are working on. Let's take a look at this. Я учусь в школе, and you know the name of your school comes right here. And don't say high school after this, because high school is already expressed in this phrase. Я учусь в школе, and the name of your school at the end. I want everybody to say this sentence after me, and please add the name of your school. Okay, everybody ready? Я учусь в школе. Хорошо. Хорошо. Now, учусь, я учусь is a difficult verb, so let's take a look at the entire conjugation for the verb учиться. Учиться. Учиться is difficult because it ends in «я». It's a suffix that appears on several Russian verbs. And also this verb belongs to the second conjugation. I did advise you to go ahead and memorize the conjugation of this verb. And you know, there's a lot of memorization involved when you are studying a foreign language. So just go ahead and memorize this. Я учусь, ты учишься, он учится, мы учимся, вы учитесь, они учатся. Хорошо. I want you to go ahead and read the conjugation of this verb in your classrooms. Хорошо. Хорошо. Now, will you do this orally for me? Я учусь. Ты учишься. Он учится. Мы учимся. Вы учитесь. Они учатся. Мы учимся в школе. Вы учитесь в школе. Хорошо. So, if I ask you, где ты учишься? Где ты учишься? You begin your answer with я учусь в школе, and you add the name of your school at the end. Я учусь в школе. You identify your school. Хорошо. Now I'm addressing this question, where do you study, to all of you, or to your classrooms. So I want you to answer on behalf of your entire classroom. Где вы учитесь? учимся, we study, мы учимся в школе, and you give the name of your school. So how would you ask your Russian friend, your Russian pen pal, where he or she studies? So where do you study? Где ты учишься? Say this after me. Где ты учишься? Хорошо. Now imagine that you are speaking to a group of Russian teenagers and you need to find out where they study. How are you going to do that? This time you are addressing a group of people. Где вы учитесь? Где вы учитесь? Did you repeat that after me? Let's try again. Где вы учитесь? Ну, хорошо. Хорошо. So, you remember how to express the school, how to express where you study. Now let's work on what we study. And when it comes to the names of different school subjects, which verb do we use? Изучать. Изучать. Let's look at the verb изучать. Я изучаю, ты изучаешь, он изучает, мы изучаем, вы изучаете, они изучают. Они изучают. Ну, хорошо. So when you express different school subjects that you study, you use the verb изучать. Я изучаю русский язык. Я изучаю математику. Я изучаю физику. So let's take a look at the list of different school subjects that you may be studying. Математика, физика, химия, биология, история, литература, экономика. Notice that these are all feminine nouns, and when feminine nouns occur in your sentences as direct objects, and those subjects that you study are direct objects in your sentences, you have to take care of the endings. Я изучаю математику. Я изучаю, use the name of the next subject, физику. Я изучаю химию. Я изучаю биологию. Я изучаю историю. Now let's work on the next one. Я изучаю литературу. And finally, I study economics. Я изучаю экономику. Ну, хорошо. And now let's talk about what Nina studies. Мы говорим о Нине. Нина учится в школе. Let's look at this paragraph that will tell us what exactly she studies at that school. Нина учится в школе номер 7. Она изучает русский язык, английский язык, математику, физику, историю и литературу. Она хорошо учится. Okay, read this paragraph in your classrooms. While we still have this on the screen, let me comment on the choice of the verbs of learning. You should remember that when we express where a person studies, we use учиться. Нина учится в школе номер 7. when we express how a person does at school. We also use the verb учиться. Look at the last sentence. Она хорошо учится. Nina studies well. She is a good student. Она хорошо учится. But with the names of school subjects, we use the verb изучать. Она изучает русский язык, английский язык, математику, физику, историю и литературу. Хорошо. So we know what Nina studies. Мы знаем, что изучает Нина. А что вы изучаете? Что вы изучаете? You begin with я изучаю, and then you give me the names of all the school subjects that you study. So let's take a look at these questions that you ought to be able to answer very quickly and very nicely. Как вас зовут? Где вы живете? Где вы учитесь? Что вы изучаете? I will give you half a minute, approximately 30 seconds, to collect your thoughts and think of how you will phrase the answers to these questions. You don't need to write anything down. Just work orally and think how you will begin your answers. Ну, хорошо, хорошо. So, what are you going to do? Как вас зовут? Меня зовут, and you add your name. Где вы живете? Я живу в штате, and you can identify your state by name. Где вы учитесь? Я учусь в школе, and you add the name of your school. And finally, что вы изучаете? Я изучаю, and you add the names of different subjects. So this is what you do. Let's take a look at this. Меня зовут, and you complete this with your name. Я живу в штате Техас. On the second sentence, you have to add the name of your state. Я учусь в школе. Name of your school at the end of the third sentence. And finally, я изучаю, and you give me the names of all the subjects that you study in the accusative case. Я изучаю русский язык, английский язык, физику, математику, историю, литературу. At this point, you ought to be able to say 4 sentences about yourselves. And this is something that you may want to practice with. What is your name, where you live, where you study, what you study. You ought to be able to say these 4 sentences even if someone wakes you up in the middle of the night. No? Хорошо. Хорошо. So let's continue talking about school and subjects that you study, but we will concentrate our attention now on languages. Итак, в школе вы изучаете русский язык и английский язык. На уроке мы говорим и читаем по-русски. Вы уже хорошо понимаете по-русски. Вы уже немного говорите по-русски. So let's look at these things that we do during our class. Мы изучаем русский язык. Мы понимаем по-русски. Мы читаем по-русски. Мы говорим по-русски. Go ahead, read these sentences in your classrooms.
Хорошо. And can you explain to me the choice of the language expressions in those sentences?
You should remember two rules. Let's look at them again. The verbs знать and изучать require the use of adjective noun expressions of languages. Я знаю английский язык. I know the English language. Мы изучаем русский язык. We study the Russian language. Знать and изучать go with two-word adjective noun expressions of languages. Русский язык, английский язык. But then there are three other verbs that require certain expressions of languages. So let's take a look at rule number 2. Verbs говорить, читать and понимать are used with adverbial expressions of languages. Мы говорим по-английски, we speak English. Мы читаем и понимаем по-русски, we read and understand Russian. So говорить, читать and понимать are always used with adverbial phrases, with phrases that begin with по. По-английски, по-русски, по-французски. Хорошо. So let us practice with French, with французский язык and по-французски. I want you to take a look at this exercise. So notice that we are working with French, французский язык, по-французски. What I need you to do now is complete these sentences with appropriate language expressions. Don't write entire sentences. Write down the expressions that you will use in these sentences. You have a minute to work on this. Ну, хорошо, хорошо. So, Антон изучает французский язык. Он хорошо читает по-французски. Он уже немного говорит по-французски. The verb изучать requires the use of an adjective noun phrase. Verbs читать and говорить go with adverbial expressions. You have to remember your rules. Ну, хорошо. Now let's move on to plurals. Remember we spent so much time talking about pens, pencils, books, letters, magazines. So let's go over this one more time. Итак, ручка, ручки. Это ручки. Это карандаши. Телефон, телефоны. Это телефоны. Хорошо. Это газета. Это газеты. Это газеты. Это журналы. Журналы. учебник. Это тоже учебник. Это учебники. Это учебники. Книга. Это книги. Это книги. Хорошо. Also, let's take a look at a few pictures. Что это? Это машины. Что это? Это самолеты. Что это? Пассажиры. Кто это? Студенты. Это студенты. А кто это? Врачи. Это врачи. Кто это? They look like engineers. Инженеры. Это инженеры. And now let's go over the rules that you need to remember. The basic plural ending for masculine and feminine nouns is «ы». Студенты, школы, журналы. But then you remember that there are certain letters that we need to watch out for. So let's take a look at what happens here. If the stem of the noun ends in ka, ge, ha, che, sha, sha, or the soft sign, the soft ending e is added. Книги, врачи, уроки, строители. So you need to remember the letters because they affect the ending. Okay? Then what happens to neuter nouns? The plural endings for neuter nouns are a and я. Письма, окна, упражнения. Or changes to a if you need the plural form. Е changes to я. So a and я are plural endings for neuter nouns. And then a little piece of good news is that borrowed words do not change their forms. Пальто stays пальто, метро stays метро, and radio also stays radio. Well, these are the rules, but from every rule we do have an exception. And we have to memorize those exceptions. So let's look at this. Дом, дома, учитель, учителя, профессор, профессора, друзья, соседи. I hope that you do remember these words. Дома, учителя, профессора, соседи. And also, you know that when it comes to family members, we need to remember a lot of words, a lot of plural family words too. And they are отцы, братья, сыновья, мужья, матери, дочери. There's nothing easy about Russian families. Отцы, братья, сыновья, мужья, матери, and дочери. So very quickly, let's look at these plural objects again. Итак, это телефоны. Это книги. Это карандаши. Это учебники. Это письма. Письма. So all you need to do here is just work with the rules and remember your exceptions. And now at the end of today's lesson, let's discuss the use of the prepositional case. So на уроке мы говорим о России, о Москве, о школе и об уроке номер 5. Мы говорим о Нине, об Иване Ивановиче и о Ларисе. And you remember that Larissa по профессии стюардесса. And she has a lot of stories to tell. So, let's look at the following exercise. О чем рассказывает Лариса? What is Larissa telling a story about? О чем? About what? О чем рассказывает Лариса? So she talks about work, about friends, about Paris, and about a passenger. How can we make up this sentence? Лариса рассказывает about work. О работе, о Франции, о Париже и о пассажире. Let's take a look at this. Лариса рассказывает о работе, о Франции, о Париже, о пассажире. Lots of stories to tell about work, about friends, about Paris, and about an interesting passenger. О пассажире. You know that your basic ending is «е», but again, we have exceptions from this rule too. So let's look at this. Remember that nouns ending in «ия», «ие», or «ий» receive the «и» ending. That's why we say «о России», «об упражнении». Nouns that end in «ия», «ие», «ий» take the «и» ending. All other nouns take the regular «е» ending. And there's one other group of nouns that we need to be very careful with, and they are feminine nouns ending in the soft sign. They too receive the «и» ending. О матери, о дочери. About mother, about daughter. Ну, хорошо. Хорошо. Well, we've reviewed a lot of material today. There wasn't anything new for you in today's lesson. We just tried to bring everything that we learned from урок номер 5 together. So as soon as this lesson is over, start working on your additional exercises, because yes, you do need to practice with all of this material that you learned from урок номер 5. And to be fully prepared for test number 5, this is what you need to do. Study lesson 5 in the Russian for Everybody textbook and pay special attention to expressions of languages, formation of plurals, and the use of the prepositional case. Also, you need to very carefully review the names of different school subjects and practice expressing where you study and what you study. Ну, хорошо. I know that this sounds like a lot, but we are trying to learn the Russian language as best as we can and as quickly as you can, so you really need to work hard. So, большое спасибо for all your hard work. Большое спасибо и до свидания. Здравствуйте. Доброе утро. Добрый день. Меня зовут Вера Алексеевна Полякова-Норвуд. Добро пожаловать на урок русского языка. Итак, на уроке, это lesson, на уроке мы изучаем русский язык. Мы говорим и читаем по-русски. Мы говорим о России, о Москве, об Иване Ивановиче, об Анне Петровне, о Максиме, о Нине. Вы уже хорошо понимаете по-русски. Вы уже хорошо читаете по-русски. Вы уже немного говорите по-русски. Вы уже немного знаете русский язык. А что? Что вы знаете по-русски? And you know that you can talk about city places, you know the names of different clothes, you can talk about people's occupations, you can talk about your family and identify each of your family members, you can talk about your school life, you know how to talk about different subjects that you study, and you can talk about your language skills in each of the languages that you have been studying. You already know Russian numbers from 1 to 10. You can talk about seasons. Do you still remember the names of seasons? You know the divisions of the day, in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening. You remember those Russian words? And you can talk about meals. So really, there's a lot that you have already learned. Вы уже говорите по-русски. Вы немного знаете русский язык. Ну, хорошо. But we have also been writing in Russian. But we never before looked at the Russian verb which means to write. Let's do it now. The Russian verb which means to write is писать. Писать. It is a first conjugation verb. But please be very careful with the verb писать. At this point you need to pick up your pens and start writing things down. What is difficult about the verb писать is its conjugation pattern. Because when we start conjugating the verb писать, right in the middle of a verb, we will get a different sound. Я пишу. I am writing. Instead of an S sound, we have an SH sound. Sh. Я пишу. I am writing. And you need to be writing this down. And as you are doing this, please underline the letter sh. Я пишу. I am writing. And now say it after me. Я пишу. And you are writing Russian. So you can say Я пишу по-русски. Я пишу по-русски. I am writing in Russian. Ты пишешь. Notice that in the second form we have the SH sound twice. Ты пишешь. Please underline the first SH sound, the letter that represents it. Sh. Ты пишешь. Он пишет. The letter sh is going to stay in all of the conjugated forms. Ты пишешь. Он пишет. Мы пишем. Вы пишете. Они пишут. I want you to copy the 3 conjugated forms that you see on your screen. Ну, хорошо. Хорошо. Итак, я пишу. Я пишу. Ты пишешь. Ты